Um, all right. So if you all are ready, happy to get started. And just to remind the people, well, just to tell the new people who just joined us, we are recording this session. We're going to make it available on the website for other people who are not able to join in to get questions answered. Um, and if you have a question that you perhaps forgot the answer to, you'll of course be able to get that at the website. Um, so here we go. I'm going to share my screen. Let me just get everything in line. Here we are. So we're all here for Catalyze. If you're not here for Catalyze, you're welcome to stay and listen, but we'll be talking about the Catalyze grant program during this info session. It is a program that is brought to you by Mid-America Arts Alliance, which is who I work for and who my colleague Diane Scott also works for. And the program is funded by the Windgate Foundation. And this is me. My name is Jade Osborne. My pronouns are she, her, and then I also invite you to think about a we and an us. I come from a performing background. I used to perform as a capoeirista, an Afro-Brazilian martial art dancer, and then I transitioned into aerial acrobatics, kind of normal, I know, boring and whatnot. But now I have the exciting job of working at Mid-America Arts Alliance as a program officer for the Artist Services Division, and we work directly with artists. So this is a program that is a direct for artist program. And my colleague Diane Scott is also here. Diane, would you like to speak a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. My name is Diane Scott, and I use she, her pronouns. I am the Director of Artist Services here at Mid-America Arts Alliance. We run a number of directly artist-serving programming. Some of you may be familiar with some of our other programs beyond Catalyze, Artist Inc., Artist Inc. Express, the Interchange program, and we're so happy to have you all here today.
Thank you, Diane. And if you have any questions, Diane is running the chat, and throughout the presentation, she will be dropping in some links and some more information for you. If you have any questions that come up during the presentation, you're welcome to add those to the chat, and we can address those during the Q&A portion. So here we are, we're all here for Catalyze, and this is the program that is providing grant funding for professional development opportunities for individual artists, as we spoke about. And the regions are the Central Arkansas and the Arkansas Delta. We provide, the program provides $10,000 for the practice-based artist to advance your careers. It also provides professional development, and this comes through a development retreat that we have. It's a once-a-year retreat where you, as fellows, would be able to refine and develop strategic plans for their creative practices and their professions. It also provides mentoring where the artist would select from more than 100 artist peer facilitators in our network. And this goes across our region. Our region is actually beyond Arkansas. We in Mid-America span a 6-state region, which is Nebraska, Kansas, Missouri, which is where I am located, Arkansas, Texas, and Oklahoma. So we have different artists who have worked within our programs from all across our region. And so that's one of the really interesting parts of this program is that you could have a one-on-one with an artist from a completely different region just to discuss your work and your progress. So if you are eligible for this program, we need to be able to prove, and you'll have that with 2 different forms of ID to demonstrate that you're living in one of the 31 counties of the Central Arkansas and Arkansas Delta. So hopefully you are in one of those counties, have a permanent address, and can submit 2 different forms of ID in your application to show that. What else we are requiring is that you are at full-time residence. You'll have 1 year residency. And just to say, we understand that people move across counties. And so some people might have a residency for 5 years in one county, and then they have recently moved to one of the other counties. So we're happy to work with that as well. It doesn't mean you have to be in the one county for the full year, if that makes sense. And then we do ask that you are retaining your residency within those 31 counties region during the grant period. The grant period goes from April 2026 all the way through April 2027. I can't believe I'm saying those numbers at this point because it seems so far away. You also will be 21 years of age from the due date. We ask for work completed in any artistic discipline. It's not limited to dance, film, the ones that we hear a lot about, literary music, theater, or visual art. You can be a social practice artist. There's all types of possibilities as far as your discipline. And then we also ask for a resume that demonstrates at least 3 years of creative practice engagement from the application due date. And so that will come through as in your resume as you're listing the dates in which you have created work. We ask that you commit to participating in a peer-to-peer strategic planning activities that come in the Catalyze retreat. That retreat will be hosted at the Marriott Hotel in Little Rock, and it goes across 2 days. So we start at 9 a.m. on a Saturday, April 25th, and then we will end on Sunday at 3 p.m. on the 26th of April. Both your meals and lodging will be provided by the program. We also ask that you are a U.S. citizen, permanent residence, or have non-resident status. You'll have to provide that valid Social Security if you are a non-resident. And then we also ask that you're in good standing with Mid-America Alliance. If you've received awards in the past, that you have no delinquent reports, and that all of your documents have been turned in prior to this program. We also ask that you haven't received more than $1,000 within any other program during our fiscal year, which began on July 1st, and it does end on June 30th. There's not many, but if you have questions about this, please drop them in the chat. We can talk more about that. And then you also, if you're eligible, you have not previously received a Catalyze grant because we want to share across the community. And here's a big one about being an enrolled student in an undergraduate or graduate program. You cannot be enrolled during your application period or during the granting time. So from now all the way through April of 2027, you could not be an enrolled student in undergraduate or a graduate program. And you also couldn't be a full-time employee or have a immediate family member that is also a full-time employee of Mid-America Arts Alliance. So that was all of our eligibility. Let's talk a little bit more about what type of grant program this is. What's really important about Catalyze is that it's a practice-based program versus a project-based program. Diane, I feel like this is really something I'm happy to chime in, but this is really your bread and butter. Diane is the developer of this program, so I'd love to hear more from you on the practice-based.
Sure, thanks. So, typically artist grants, individual artist grants, have been based in projects, meaning that you as an artist, you develop a project to some sort of specific criteria that the grantor is asking for, and you tell us about the project as a part of that application. So you submit a timeline and a budget and ideas for the project and who's going to be involved and create a vision for that. This is not a project-based grant, and it does change some things for that reason. This is a practice-based grant, so that means that we are funding individual artists for their entire creative practice, not for a specific project, which is awesome, right? So it doesn't have to be to create something new, but there are some things that change as a result of that. Jade, can you change to the next slide? All grants that are out there, and this is true for us as well, we are a re-granter, so we applied for a grant to the Windgate Foundation so then we could re-grant the funds to people through the Catalyze program. All grants are a combination of both what have you done in the past and what do you plan to do in the future. And when we talk about the typical type of granting that most of you are familiar with submitting a project, that balance on how much of it is about what you have already done versus what you plan on doing is about 25% past. So what have you done? Do you have a good resume? What does your work look like? Versus 75% future. What are you planning on doing in this project and how are you detailing that? And have you shared an exciting vision for what you want to make? In these practice-based grants, that weight really, really changes. And so it really swaps to almost exactly the opposite because the vast majority of what you will be submitting and sharing with us and how the panelists will make decisions about who to advance to the final round in this will be based on your past performance. So sharing your work, your vision, what have you done previously, your resume, and very little of this is based on your future plans. We do indeed ask you a couple of questions about the future, and we'll talk more about those later. But indeed, most of the weight on this is on demonstrating what you have been doing for the last 3+ years as a part of your creative practice. Does that make sense, Jade?
I think so. And we can definitely make some time to discuss that in the end because it is a unique program for that reason. So what is included in the application itself? Artist biography, artist statement. We'll ask for resume and CV, work samples, a work sample summary, and then narrative questions, what you will be asked to answer. So let's talk about the artist biography. Really what we're asking for is for you to explain who are you, to talk more about yourself, your work, and what you have done. Remember, that's that past. And it is written in third person. We ask for 100-word maximum. The biography may be used in the future, so that's why we ask for a smaller maximum, a 100-word maximum. For the resume and CV, we ask for, it's a comprehensive history. We're looking for a maximum of 3 pages, and it's usually using 11 or 12-point typeface. And we ask that it's saved as a PDF and it's an upload to the application. In your resume, it's helpful to use terminology where everyone can understand it. So whatever acronyms you might have, actually spell them out. We recommend using that reverse chronological order. This is where we'll be able to see that at least 3 years of your creative practice is in your CV. So if you start from 2025 and then move backwards, it doesn't have to be chronological in the way, that's not the right word. It doesn't have to be exact from 2025 to 2022. It could be 3 years across multiple years. If hopefully that makes sense to everyone. If there's a question, please let us know. We also ask that you just use a simple design. The elaborate templates can sometimes be difficult to read, especially for the panelists who are looking at a lot of information in between 10 to 20 minutes per each application. So just, straightforward is really helpful. Your artist statement is the opportunity to describe what you make and how and why you make it. It should give the panel reviewers the insight into your work and your process and what inspires you. And this is always written in the first person. And we ask for this to be a maximum of 250 words. And if I remember correctly, that's about 2 to 3 paragraphs. Is that right? So it's not that much, but again, trying to be concise and clear is really the best for the panelists. Your work samples are really where we're going to see the history, your past work, and what you're bringing to this application. And remember, that's the 75% of what this application really is. So you have the opportunity to submit up to 5 work samples, and the samples can be uploaded or provided as URL links. All uploaded files should be titled with your name as well as what they are. And that would mean like sample 1, 2, 3, or 4, or 5. And please do include your first name and last name. There's some specific instructions. We can go over that in detail a little later. You can mix and match your work samples. So if you have both visual and audio components to your work, we could have both. Each of the visual components, we need those to be less than 1 MB maximum if you're uploading. And we just have a maximum amount of space. It's not much. So 1 MB really is not much. If you would like a larger portion, like a more in-depth visual piece to be noticed or seen by the panelist, I would recommend linking that URL to your website or where that image might be found, not uploading it. An audio sample or a video sample, we ask for 1 minute to be equivalent to 1 sample. If you would like to upload, again, a mix and match of those, you can do that. We do ask for timestamps so that the panelists know which portion to listen to. Otherwise, the panelists will just listen or watch the first minute. So just keep that in mind. If you're not specific, they may be watching just the first minute or listening to the first minute of your sample. And then for your literary works, 2 pages equal 1 sample. And I believe in the past we've had scripts put in that had multiple pages. So each 2-page portion was 1 sample. If it's a 10-page portion of a book, those are the five work samples all in one. Your work sample summary is your narrative document that describes and gives more context about your work samples. And that will be 1,000 words. So this is a real big chunk. This is really the largest area of space that you have for describing your work. Some of the examples of putting together a summary would include your name, the title of the work, perhaps where the work lives online, the type of the medium or dimensions, if these are visual pieces, the date of completion, number of pages, things along those lines. We ask that you, again, indicate the selections for review if the timestamp for the audio and video file could be included in your work sample summary. And then also, again, you have this extra space for your creative work here in this description section. So we encourage you to take this extra paragraph of space because it's, you have 1,000 words total, which don't ask me to, that could be pages, 3 pages maybe. But we encourage you to take an extra paragraph of space to explain the relevance of your work. More narrative equals more clarity for the panelists to envision the whole picture of your application. That's really the strength of the applications are because it's painting an entire picture for the panelists. So you want to paint this picture of what you've accomplished and how you intend to grow through the program. Here's an example for a visual artist. So here we are, the work sample number 1 would be the title. There is the name, I'm sorry, work sample summary is the work sample number 1 is which one it is. The name of the artist, the title is italicized, and then your medium, dimensions, the date it was completed. And then there is that paragraph to describe the work itself. So the narrative questions, this is again, part of that 75% of what you're presenting to the panelists so that your complete picture will be understood. So the first question is we're asking you to explain how your creative practice has evolved over the past few years, what you've been working on, how your work has changed, and why have those changes happened, and if there's any obstacles or limitations. So again, just talking about your work from the point in the past to this now place, just to get a feel for what you're bringing forward and who you are as an artist and a creative. 250 words, which is about that 2 to 3 paragraphs. The future of your creative practice. This is the only question that we're asking, so it would apply to that 25%, that future part of where you're going. How do you envision your creative practice in 5 years? And what are some of these self-determined goals that you've set for your practice? So these are goals you decide, and how you are kind of aligning with your goals and your planning for your career. Um, there is a little bit of a question about the funding as well, but the future is something that the panelists are looking into, but we're really still focusing on what you're bringing forward. Here's our fun use question. If you are awarded the grant monies, what plans do you have to take your creative practice to the next level? So again, this will apply to that future plan, but there's really no judgment here about what your choice is. We've had lots of answers. And so, really, if you are, and this would be me, I've been a physical performer, and now I'm at a point where my body needs more healing after performances. So I actually might utilize some of the monies to pay for rehab, or to pay for equipment that would aid in my rehab. So, there's not a judgment on what you're choosing to use the funds for. This is a curiosity, but also to help paint that full picture of what you're bringing to the program, what you're looking for in terms of receiving from the program, and where you'll carry things forward. Here's our professional development question. Given the requirements of the grant, how would participating in the retreat benefit your creative practice? You're going to be learning from a small group of like-minded peers. The groups are 5 and 6, so you have 5 peers and then a facilitator. You'll have personalized mentoring from that facilitator, and you're going to be given a chance to expand your network with other regional artists. So we're curious about what skills and experiences you would like to bring to those moments to share with your peers. And this is the meat of the retreat in itself, when we have this opportunity to be in space together. So in that moment, and again, after COVID, these are moments that, a lot of people really enjoy because we don't get them as we used to. So what would you bring to this time together, this day and a half of time spent with 5 other artists in your region? And what would you bring as far as what you have learned, what you have gained in your career? What would you bring forward in those gatherings with other artists? So those are our narrative questions. If you have questions about those, you're welcome to drop those in the chat. I'm not looking at the chat, but I'm hoping that if you are having questions, then we're addressing them, and we can talk more about that in the Q&A section. We're going to talk about the review and the review criteria and the process of how that's done. This would be the panelist part. Part of your application, you will be allowed to select what type of panel you would like to look at your work. So if you are a musician, easy, you would choose a music panel. So there are some in there. We have an interdisciplinary panel for those who might feel like their work goes beyond just one specific panel, but you get to select that. The panelists will be looking at artistry. So the selected artist will demonstrate artistic excellence broadly defined by the practitioners and the norms in your discipline, in the discipline that you select. And the selected artist will also show a deep commitment to their work, as well as an active creative practice in Central Arkansas and the Arkansas Delta for a minimum of 3 years. We're also really interested in seeing how you continue to further evolve within your region. This is the opportunity to showcase your artistic talent and passion for your chosen field. So, in your application, think of demonstrating a deep commitment to your work and demonstrate a proven track record of your creativity. If you describe your creative practice and share your desire to continue and grow your skills in the central Arkansas Delta region, then the panelists will really understand what you're bringing forward for this this grant program. Another aspect that the panelists will be looking at is for program readiness. The selected artists will have desire to advance their career, deepen their practice, and engage in an active management process surrounding their practice, as well as having an interest in sharing their work and process as part of the network of artists in a peer learning environment. This is an opportunity to show your strong desire to advance your career and demonstrate your artistic practice. If you demonstrate how you are prepared to engage in this strategic planning and management of your work, you can also show how you're interested in sharing your work and experiences with these other artists in a supportive network. Finally, the panelists are looking at how the impact of the funding will be on your practice. And selected artists will clearly identify the ways in which the Catalyze funds and the program will impact your career and your creative practices. And those should relate to your previous challenges and or your desired futures, that's what you have described already by answering those narrative questions. So this is the opportunity for you to clearly explain how Catalyze funding will benefit your career and your artistic journey. You'll have a chance to identify any challenges, again, that you've faced in the past and how this funding will help you overcome them. You can share your goals and aspirations for the future with us through those narrative questions. And this is just a way to make it really clear for the panelists. We have an entire section now, thanks to the world that we live in, on artificial intelligence or AI. Just so that you are aware, panel review process is where we will hire artists and arts professionals to serve as panelists in those specific practice roles that we looked at earlier. The panelists cannot use AI when reviewing your applications, and panelists are also required to provide comments that do not utilize AI. Diane, was there another addition that we had for this section on AI?
Well, just a notation, right, that of course you cannot submit at this time art that is generated by using artificial intelligence. And while you might very well want to use artificial intelligence, such as ChatGPT or one of those other mechanisms to help in the preparation of your narrative questions and such, we're going to really strongly recommend against doing that. And there are some particular reasons for this right now. The answers end up being very, very similar to one another, and that will actually be a disadvantage to you. Interestingly, once again, I said we are re-granters, and so I literally just wrote a grant that required that I use AI for this. And, it's actually quite a lot of work to get it so that it really shows who you are and what you are doing. Now, that being said, I strongly encourage you to use AI to help you to make sure that your answers are mechanically correct, so that your sentence structure is good, that your wording is tight, that you meet the word count requirements, which sometimes all the word count requirements for this are pretty small. 250 words is not very much. And so AI can be very, very helpful in helping you take a longer statement, for example, or something down to a particular word count. But you should be a very active participant as a part of this. Don't just take what the AI spits out for you. And honestly, because it is so easily accessible for everybody to use these tools today to help with the mechanics of your writing. I think it actually puts a little bit higher burden on people to have mechanically correct, so grammatically correct statements and things for those narrative questions because it is accessible for people to use that. In the past, that wasn't necessarily the case, but it does raise that bar a little bit. And we can certainly talk about this further in questions with people as well.
Thank you, Diane. So going back to that panel review process, they're not going to be using AI. And Diane just went over what we would encourage you, if you are using AI, to only utilize it for specific purposes. The other part of the panel review is once they have decided on which the highest recommendations are for the applications, those are going to go into a lottery. And the reason for this is that there are probably about a third of the applications that get very high recommendations. And we might have 300 applications, so that means 100 of those applications are getting very high recommendations. And how do we whittle those down? How do we decide on these very high recommendations? And so in order to do that, that's why we have a lottery system in order to make it across the board so that we pull from the highest recommendation to get to our 25. So the applications are open now, and they'll be open through December 3rd at 5 p.m. is when they'll close. We do look through all of the applications for eligibility just to make sure your links work and your uploads came through. So that will happen in December. In January is when all the applications will go through the panel review process. And we expect to make announcements to the applicants, whether you were accepted or your application was not accepted in mid-February. So you should hear back from us in mid-February. In May, that's when we would be providing feedback. Everyone has the option to select to receive feedback from the panelists during that process in your application. So we'll be sending that out in May. Other important dates. In March is when you would be filling out financial forms and doing the grant agreements. In April, there is some pre-retreat homework that will be happening because later in April is when the retreat will happen. We also will make a public announcement of the Catalyze grantees in April. And then the retreat there, the dates are April 25th to 26th. And after the retreat, the funding is distributed. We distribute 9,500, so almost total, that's 95% of the grant in May of 2026. Then in July to August, you'll have a small group session after the retreat with the group that you met during your retreat. We'll do another session sometime in October or November next fall. And then you'll be able to select your one-on-one sessions with artist peer facilitators across the region during the entire grant year. So from May 2026 through May of 2027, most people get those done within the first 6 months. Finally, in April of 2027, we will have you fill out a final report survey. And once that survey is completed, then the final funding distributed, that last 5% of the grant will be distributed to you in May of 2027. So here's some tips for the application. We suggest that you compose your answers to the questions in a Word document separately. And then when you are ready, you can go onto the application and paste them. And this will allow you to do your edits, to have your family or your friends or community, bless you, to support you, to actually to look into that, to editing your work, and to support you through the process. That's what I meant. So if you're doing that on a side Word document and then pasting it, there's also a lesser chance of that information being lost because internet's, sometimes things go crazy. We also ask that you verify that all of the files that you're uploading, and that would be, your CV, that would be your proofs of residency, those two proofs of residency, as well as your work samples. If you're uploading those, that they're all less than 1 MB in size. And again, that's not big. You'll get an error message if you try to submit, and it will be because your file types are too large. If you are uploading, we do ask that you name your file with your first name and last name and what that file is. So first name, last name, resume, first name, last name, sample one, sample three. So those types of things, just so that we can keep it clear when we're looking through your application. We also ask that you verify all the URLs that you're submitting are accessible to the public. And this is very specific for YouTube or Vimeo files. Those need to be opened so that public viewing can be seen, because we'll have panelists, multiple panelists looking at that work. If you need to keep those URLs private, please provide the password within your work sample summary so that the panelists will see that they need to enter a password in order to access that URL. We also ask that you are saving frequently as you're going through this application. There's a place on the top right where you can save. Again, internet, computer things, it's very hard to trust. So hopefully you're saving frequently as you go, even saving that Word document as you're composing. And also start early. It'll be great if you started prior to the Thanksgiving weekend. I'm just going to say that Thanksgiving weekend, I will not be working. So if you have problems or issues and you are reaching out to Artist Services email for help, we wouldn't be able to get back to you till after that Thanksgiving weekend. And my assumption is perhaps some people will wait to start until that late, which is the week before it's due. If you start early, just do little bits at a time, work on that Word document on your own time, and piece it out. It will seem a lot less daunting. You're also welcome to ask for help. I'm here, Diane's here. We have a whole other part, people in our team who are here to help. And you can ask your community for help. You could ask family for help. And this is help with their editing, just to see if you're making yourself clear, if you're really painting yourself in the picture of your creative practice and the history of it clearly. So ask for help as you're going through your application process. And this is where you can get more application support. You can email us, ask questions. One-off questions are completely fine. You can also ask very long questions. We can get to the heart of it. We also have office hours that are available to you if you want to sign up. We can do a Calendly office hour one-on-one. It's a 20-minute, you can have multiples if you need, but it's just signing up, and then you'll have a one-on-one, or just a chat session with me to talk about any questions you might have about the application. During this application support time, I can't give specific feedback to how your application will be received, because I wouldn't know. I'm not the one who's doing. The panelists are the ones who are reviewing. But I can certainly help you with if you're having any issues with technical issues with the application. If just having a little bit more of an understanding of the narrative question. So I'm happy to help at any time. You can sign up for that application support. And those office hours will be there through December 3rd, the closing day. The closing day, which is December 3rd, it's a Wednesday, I will be on a Zoom all day. So if you have some very, very last minute questions right before you hit submit, and that's when you want to hit submit is on the last day, you can pop into that all day Zoom and just ask a question, because I'll be there as well. So you can find me in many ways. And then if you want to complete your application verbally, which means that there might be an accessibility need that you have, you can just request assistance through the email. And I just request that by November 14th so that there's enough time to do that, to set that application session up, and so that we could fill out that application for you verbally. And I'll just say that that Thanksgiving break, I don't know if you saw that in the chat or not, but that's almost at the very end, November 27th and 28th. So that will be when we do not have support set up. Woo, we flew through this. I'll just check, Diane. I tend to forget things. Did I forget anything?
I don't think you forgot anything, but certainly now would be a great time if people have questions. If you have a question, somebody else has the same one, so don't be shy.
And I'm happy to stop sharing so you can see faces because that's way more fun.
I have a question. It's not fully formed, so bear with me. So I have been working on a project that I hope will be an annual project. And so is there advice on how to incorporate that without it seeming like, oh, I want this money for this project? It's really just so it can, I mean, basically it's a free poetry festival. And so we're working on that. This is the first one this year. Am not getting paid for any of the work that I'm doing, which, love it and would do it all over again. But I would also like to have some monetary assistance with that. So is there a way to package that with what we've been doing and advice on ways to make it, this is future project, this is where my heart is right now, etc.
I love how you phrase that. Just this is where my heart is right now.
Okay.
I think the more human that you convey, I think, because you are speaking to humans, I think that was part of the reason why we had that whole AI session that section is to just, be yourself. There are moments where it's asking you about what your future plans are. I don't know if you need to sit with that, explaining that project for more than a sentence or two. You could say that it's along your trajectory of your creative career in creative practice. And I think, just mentioning it is very powerful. But if that's where your heart is, I think that's a great statement to make.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a question. If you, I just finished filming my most recent film, and I don't know if it will be done in time by the submission deadline. Is a trailer okay, or what can I provide that would go well enough with, hey, this is my capability and this is my most recent work?
I think a trailer would be great, or even if you want to have just a portion of a finished scene that you might feel like represents. But I think the trailer would be great.
Okay, thank
And
you.
Diane, please chime in.
Reality would be, right, that you can only submit, I mean, you could only submit up to 5 full minutes of film anyway. So you're going to have to make choices and
Oh,
edit.
gotcha.
So probably, a trailer actually doesn't do a terrible job. And we have seen quite a few people who work in film submit trailers.
Okay, so 5 minutes total
Yes.
for all of your work.
Yes.
I have a
And
question.
do you also want scripts if you're the one that wrote it, or is there anything that can aid to submissions?
I've seen both. I've seen filmmakers submit only video, and then I've seen those who submit both the video and an excerpt of the script. I think the way in which you want to present yourself, if it really is, not only am I making, I'm also screenwriting, I'm also producing. If you're really trying to paint your picture as a as a holistic artist for that film, I think it might be helpful to show the different aspects of what you have created.
Okay.
And there was another question.
Yes, that's me, Maria Hoskins. How are you?
Maria.
Hi. So my question is this: I am a children's book author, and I'm wondering in my submissions and my samples, is it the book cover and um, maybe a clip from where my book has been read online, or are the book covers sufficient? What would be my best submission regarding children's books?
Okay. You are the writer?
Yes.
Are you the cover designer?
No, I am the author.
Okay.
I
So what-
hire, work for art for the illustrators.
Gotcha. I would suggest that you submit the work that you created, so the writing elements. And again, it's going to be tricky because we can't have too much. So with literary work, it would be 10 pages total. And with children's books, it's probably that means what? Do you have like a sentence per page or something like that?
Yes.
Yeah. So I would say it would be a challenge, but if you have a concise way of putting what you have created in 10 pages, but I wouldn't highlight another artist's work in your application because the panelists really want to see what you're bringing forward.
So I have a clip, some clips, like one where Craig O'Neill is reading my book on Arkansas PBS. Can, is that sufficient? Is that okay?
I think that's great because then
Okay.
we get more of your story, and that would be a minute or two, depending on how long um, that that video clip is. You'd have to decide what you would be submitting, how it all balances. But I think
Okay.
that's a great idea.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And that reminds me of there was an artist it was a visual artist who did a large scale installation. And because we're asking for just, smaller works, they wanted to do a video to demonstrate the scale of that installation. And so that was a different way than normal of demonstrating their work, whereas normally it would be, a flat, digital file of 1 megabyte or less. But they were able to give a scale of what that installation is because it was interactive. So there's other elements that you might consider in how you're capturing your work and submitting it for a work sample. You're welcome. Oh, and that wasn't just to you, Maria. It was just something you reminded me of. I was like, oh, yes. Because those are exciting when you see something presented in a different way. That also helps as an applicant to stand out because, oh, I remember that was a visual installation piece that was a video, so I think that also helps in your application.
I have a question.
Yes, Christy?
Yes, so you've brought up 1 megabyte a couple of times. So is that 1 megabyte for the entire application or per sample?
Per upload, yes, per sample. Whatever it is you're uploading. So that'll be your resume CV. That would be your proof of residency, the 2 proofs of residency, 1 megabyte each. And then I don't know if I made it clear during the presentation, if you have visual work that you want a panelist to really dig into, and you don't feel like it can be conveyed by uploading a 1 megabyte file, I would recommend linking a URL so that image might be held in a higher resolution somewhere else and that the panelist could zoom in.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question.
Yes, Jeff.
So I'm a visual artist and I have multiple series of work. I do mostly painting. Do you think that are you looking more for to submit work in one series, or is it more important to show across multiple series of work? Or, like the question, do you go in depth in one series or do you want to see more broad a broad view because five images is not very many.
Not. And Diane, feel free to chime in here. What I feel might be important to think about is the the entire picture that you're painting of your creative practice. And so if your work has shifted or altered across those series, I think it would be interesting to see. And you could submit, I think we've done like a series piece as one piece. But I mean, also keep in mind if it's a series of 20, that's going to be a lot of work for a panelist to look at 20 times 5. So if there's just a 2 or 3 per series, I'm not really sure. I'm just kind of talking here. But I think if your work evolves or changes, then I would highlight those series pieces that demonstrate that evolution, just because we're asking about it. So whatever supports what you've been speaking about in your application.
But I would
Okay.
also just caution a little bit. So panelists as a general rule, if your work is really changed, right? Or you're working in different bodies or different media or different conceptual ideas. So if it all really looks like it's from you and it's similar, then that's fine. But if the things are kind of wildly different, what you're doing, and you're like, oh, I'm trying to get everything in here because I do this community-based work and I do this stuff and I do this and this, and you're throwing in one picture for each or one URL for each. Panelists don't understand that very well. Even though they themselves are all artists, so all of our panelists are working artists, they, as a general rule, don't respond very well to that. They get confused. And so be sure that you're showing them kind of a complete vision and selecting. So all these questions that everybody has about what to include, it is the most difficult part. You should, if you have your own personal website, I would encourage you to set up some pages on the back that maybe had, if you have a particular several series that you're wanting to highlight that feel like a cohesive vision of your work over the past 5 years. I would probably set up 3 hidden URLs on my website that had 2 or 3 pictures on each of them and submit that link. That's a way to handle that. You can also, people will put them together into a PDF as well. So they'll put several, like if you had a big installation piece and you were wanting to show different views and that was one series, they might put several pieces on a PDF and that would work as one thing. It is a complicated thing. I really encourage you to ask for input from people. Does it make sense what you're sharing, right? If you look at it and I don't know anything about you, does that make sense to me? Or does it feel like it doesn't relate to each other?
If we get these put together, the work samples, we could submit, we could have an ask or a help from you all to say, does this, in your view, is this over the limit? or the worst thing I want to do is submit something that gets thrown out because it doesn't meet the guidelines.
We can't give you opinions about whether or not we feel like that's in a cohesive set,
Oh,
right? But
no,
we can give you
right, no.
opinions about eligibility for sure.
Okay, great.
Mhm.
Thank you.
And I'll just say what seems to make the most sense in painting this picture is to really delve into the narrative questions prior to selecting your work samples, because your work samples are going to support that picture that you're painting, that the way in which you're describing your creative practice. And so exactly what Diane was saying, if your creative practice, if you're talking about it over the course of 20 years and it's gone from point A to point D or Z, as mine has, that's way too much information. I wouldn't be able to fit it into those 250 word max limits anyway. So as you're kind of editing yourself down to present whatever that answer is, I think that will help get clear on what your work will support in that answer, if that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah, I mean that was another question I had, is the history part, like how far back do you go? And I guess what you're saying is the 250 word limit is going to kind of help you parse out.
Narratively, yes, but in your CV,
Yeah, narratively.
yeah, in your CV, up to 3 pages.
Sure.
I don't know if there's a drop-off point where it's like irrelevant. I don't know. Is there something, Diane, that you've come across and no?
I don't think so, but I think for most people, right, like about a 5 year limit. So if we're talking about, so if I think, for example, about my own personal CV is 20 pages long. And so the only way to be able to include that is to do a heavy edit. And so some of that would be chronological, some of that would be just things that I don't even include at all and have selected categories on that. Your panelist is going to sit with your application and they're going to take and they're going to look at each of these pieces that you give them kind of all in one setting, right? They're going to start by reading your artist statement and your bio, the way this is set up. They'll read your bio, they'll read your artist statement, they'll look at your resume, and then they'll look at your work samples in combination with that work sample summary, which really does give you a lot of options to provide some context for what you're submitting and why you're doing that. So I would think that the most important part of your application is making those selections about what to include, but in terms of documentation. But that work sample summary is your free chance. It's like your wild card where you get to put in things to make things make sense. But you want to make sure that that whole thing makes sense together, right? So all those different pieces work together, which is hard when you've had that's a difficult task when you've had a long career. You probably have to take a subsection of it.
Yeah. Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes, Justice.
So, I attempted to get a grant from you guys a few years ago. Obviously, I wouldn't be here if I did get it, but a lot of things in my work samples and things I said about myself and where I'm going still kind of apply today. Do you get any demerits from still having some of that information provided? Okay, okay,
No, totally different panelists.
okay,
And if they did know you, they would have to excuse themselves from reviewing you.
okay,
We don't talk about that, but yeah, that's because they're across the region, but yeah. So, and I would say if any of you have applied in the past and have received feedback, Justice, did you get feedback from your
yes,
application?
yes,
Was any of that feedback helpful?
definitely,
Okay, so then I would
definitely.
use what that feedback was to kind of inform the way that you approach this next application period. The questions are a little different, but they still are basically the same. And
Okay,
then the eligibility I mean the app, the things that you're supporting. So your work samples, we're still asking for 5. All of that stuff is still the same. So
okay,
if any of
perfect.
you have applied in the past and received feedback, that's precious stuff right there. That's the gold and while it won't be the same panelists, that gives you that panelist perspective. And
Okay.
has anyone served on a panel, an arts panel in this room? Has anybody had that experience? Because that's another thing just to add to your practice is to consider signing up to be a panelist. So then you can see what that back end is as an artist, what you're looking for. It really opens up the way in which you're writing your applications from having that experience. So that's just something I would recommend. Made a huge difference for me.
Can I just ask a question? How many of you in here have applied for Catalyze in rounds 1 through 3 before? How many of you have applied before? Okay. And if any of you have applied before and you made it to the final round, we actually tell people when they make it to the final round that it's just the universe. You can basically resubmit what you had before. I know I wouldn't personally do that without doing some tweaks based on the panelist feedback that I did get. But if you've gotten to that point, you definitely should reapply. Like it's just for sure you should definitely reapply. It's just the universe at that point didn't pull your number, honestly, right?
And one more question. So I am a musician, and since the last time I applied, I also added a videography to my resume. Um, and they kind of work together simultaneously. Am I still able? I know you mentioned it. I'm just trying to get some clarification. Could I still add both of those in there?
You can. I would if you feel like your videography is as strong as your music, Because it's a new practice, that would be the only question I would have. Just
Okay.
because, sometimes it takes time to develop. Not to say you're not naturally talented, I'm sure that you are, but that would be the only question is, are you, in painting that picture, is this the strongest work that supports what you're talking about in those narrative answers? And if it
Okay.
is, great. I think the next question would be, do you select a music panel or an interdisciplinary panel,
Yes.
or a film panel? That would be the next question is how do you want your work to really be viewed?
Okay.
Specifically, because interdisciplinary panelists are looking at work that is multiple disciplines, but it's across the board. So it could be a visual artist, a ceramicist, dancer. How cool would that be? But you know what I'm saying? Like those panelists have experiences that are across multiple practices, but maybe not necessarily the ones that you are. So that's also something to consider.
Okay. Okay.
But I'm looking forward to your application, Justice, and how it's grown. No, I'm not going to compare it, but just in having multiple practices it makes for a very interesting application, in my opinion.
Okay. So if my videography isn't as strong and representative of myself, then I probably shouldn't include it since it's still fairly new, like you said, right?
I'm not telling you your videography is not strong and doesn't represent you. I just think you have to ask yourself that question.
Okay.
That's
Okay.
what I
Yes,
mean.
ma'am. All right.
And especially because you have a really great feedback from your music application.
Okay.
So, yeah,
Thank you.
of course. And Lise, did I see you come off mute? Okay,
Yes,
you have a question?
yes. I'm trying to understand how to write the part about any kind of community work. So let's say that the vision is to do something in the community and get artists together or something. And so does that have to do with the budget? Do I have to say the vision is to spend the money on this or just my personal artwork, and sort of how to?
Yeah, you could mention that in your fund use answer, but there is a portion of talking about how you plan your next 5 years, what are your self-determined goals, and I would kind of weave it into that, because the fund use again is not judgmental. I think it just is another tick, like, okay, they've already said these things and they're planning on using the funds in that way, that makes sense. But if you first need to say the thing, so if I'm being clear on that, I
Yeah,
think that's part of your future vision for your creative practice in the next 5 years. Go ahead, Diane. I think you have it clearer.
Well, and just I'm seeing a private question. I apologize for not catching that. I was working back and forth, but this notion, it is a pretty new notion that we would fund you just for being artists, right? Like it's really hard to take yourself away from the idea that we are looking for you to do a particular project and have a budget for it. There is no budget required for this. And how you choose to use those funds, first off, no one's going to go back and say, you said you were going to use them this way in your application, and then you use them differently. Honestly, we kind of hope maybe you do after we have the professional development retreat, make some choices on the basis of some of the work that we did. It is totally appropriate to use the funds for all sorts of things. And so maybe your hindrance is that you don't have sufficient space to do what you need to do. So you're going to spend it on studio space. Maybe you have childcare issues and you don't have enough time to do the work. And so you're going to use the money to pay for childcare. Maybe what you want to do is that you just haven't had sufficient time while you were earning other money from other sources. And so you're going to put this money into your savings account, and so that you have the opportunity to say no to projects so you can develop a future thing. There's no right or wrong answer. We've had people use these things for, matter of fact, some of the most successful fund use, in my opinion, has been people who've used it for vacations, people who've been working artists for 20 years and never had a vacation. And golly, they go off and they take a vacation to all the national parks and come back with a whole new body of work, even though that wasn't the intent. It was just having some free space in their brain to be able to make new things. And so you don't have to have a budget for us. You are certainly welcome to use these funds if you are awarded in service of a particular project, but don't feel like you have to have that for this.
thank you.
And this is kind of reminding me of, where where I failed to start, which was just, thanking each of you, not only for showing up, but for doing the work that you're doing in your communities, for yourselves, for your families, just in the world. And that in itself is, makes you valuable and worthy of anything that you could ever be awarded. And so really, I mean, again, this is it eventually moves to a lottery, but it doesn't mean that the work that you're doing is not valuable. If you're not awarded, if you are awarded, whatnot, the fact that you are creating the work is, and just being a creative, and it's just really important, I believe, to our world. Christy, did I see you come off mute earlier? Did you have a question? Maybe not. And was there anything in the
I
chat?
do.
Oh,
Oh, I do. Sorry.
oh, great. Oh, no,
Uh,
sorry. Please do.
yeah, I put it in the chat, but I'm back. Yeah, so I am a photographer and videographer and leaning more and more into my photography. Though I was planning on using at least one URL to a video because it kind of goes with the other stuff. When I'm looking for panel, do I go to film or do I go interdisciplinary? Because I didn't see photography as a deal.
Hmm.
Typically, photography would be visual arts, right? So I guess
Mhm.
it depends on what the balance of the work is and which part you're most heavily relying on, right? So is it primarily photography? If you were going to really focus on the photography, you would choose a visual panel. If you are going to really heavily rely on the videography, that would be a film panel. And if it is genuinely a combination of both and an interdisciplinary panel, so it's a very unique question for your particular body of work.
I appreciate it. That gives me a lot of clarity. Thanks.
And just so people know, everybody is reviewed by a panel of 5 people in the panel selection. You get to self-choose. We don't determine for you which panel you go into. It's 5 people, and the lowest panelist score is always removed.
Any other questions? Is there anything we missed in the chat? I think we're all caught up in the chat. Well, Christy, I really look forward to figuring out or seeing what panel you decide to select. Oh, Jeff has a question. Yeah, just shy of 300. And so that we get a little bit under 300. Every year it goes up a little bit more. Well, and especially with the addition of the Delta region, which was new from last year, we did get more. And that's, I think, what we were discussing with we begin with 300, and then the highest recommendations are usually about a third of that. And that's when we go into the lottery. So then it ends up being about a quarter of the highest recommendations are the 25 are selected from that. Well, I just want to thank you all for making a little bit of time to be here. If you have any follow-up questions, feel free to email us or sign up for a Calendly. I think everybody got my email address directly, which is jade@maaa.org, so you can reach out to me directly. I hope this was helpful. And again, we just look forward to seeing your work and receiving your applications um, and and pushing you on to the panelist round so that then we can get you into this. Oh, and thanks, Diane. Yeah, we're going to send you a follow-up right after. Well, have a great day, and I'll hear from you all soon.